What is up, my mates of YouTube? My name is Aussie Marcel, and today here in Victoria, Australia, it is a beautiful winter's day. The sun is out. There's a bit of a breeze, and it's quite frigid, but the sun is nice. And earlier, before, I was sitting outside, and I just took my sunnies off, and I was just appreciating the sun on my face. It's something that you take for granted, especially in Victoria, where you do get 4 seasons. I know there's this popular misconception that Australia is just stinking hot 24/7 and there's never anything else. But Victoria and pretty much all of the southern states, it's not like that at all. We do get winters down here, and they can be pretty brutal. We don't get snow where I am, but it's still bloody cold, especially with the wind coming in off the ocean, off of the Southern Sea. It's pretty brutal. So I was just sitting out in the sun before, appreciating the warmth on my face. And I think those of us in Australia, we have this disconnection from everywhere else in the world, just because we're so isolated down here, along with New Zealand. They'll sort of know what I'm talking about. But those, the New Zealanders, the Kiwis, as we affectionately refer to them here in Australia, they'll know what I mean. We're so isolated down here. And I know Tassie, people in Tasmania, which is Australia's southernmost state, they will know what I'm talking about, probably more than anyone else. Australia is so isolated down here, and we sort of, our political cycle, our news, all of that stuff, it's almost of no consequence because we're so far removed from the rest of Western society. We are part of the Anglosphere, as it's called online. But we're both blessed and cursed with that. We're blessed in that we can sort of keep to ourselves and cultivate, a good attitude down here. Interesting noise. People like that about Australians, We're typically, I won't say we're an overly serious people. We've always got a good sense of humor. I feel like in the last couple of years, though, our humor's taken a bit of a nosedive because you can't joke about some things nowadays. But on the positive side of that, I think there's that Australian spirit where, it is called the Australian spirit. And part of that is that we never take ourselves too seriously. And I like that about us. I like that our news is basically the world news because, it's pretty quiet here in Australia. I mean, obviously, stuff happens in every single nation on Earth. But generally, we're pretty disconnected from the rest of the world. And I think that's sort of a blessing because it allows us to sort of, foster our own culture, foster our own attitudes towards things. We've got a pretty close relationship with United States, Canada, the UK, obviously all of those Western, the main players in the West. But Australia, we're down here chilling, and that's just what we do. So I think we are a good example of a nation that could probably make positive changes for the future, and other nations can observe us make those changes. So, for instance, let's just say we wanted to hit a different emissions target or something like that. Now, I'm not saying whether or not we should or shouldn't do that because it's a complicated issue, but let's just say we have a certain emissions target and we want to hit that target. Well, if we employ the right methods and hit that target, other nations can look at what we're doing and go, alrighty then, Australia's a good model for this because for the most part, we have a pretty small population, but a huge land mass. So you can get a good gauge of what a country sort of needs to do in order to make changes, positive changes. I think a lot of our country is reliant on exports. Obviously, uranium is one of them, iron's another one, and livestock. Livestock is another huge one. Now, the issue of livestock, I don't believe in live exports because it's cruel. Anyone can go on YouTube or the internet, any website pretty much, and you'll be able to find footage, recent footage that is, of animals being mistreated, crammed together, forced to live amongst their own filth, forced to live amongst rotting members of their own little circles. It's hard to watch. Anyone with any degree of empathy or anything like that will watch that and they'll go, alrighty, I get it. That's probably not a great thing. But I'm from cattle country down in Victoria, you know. I've grown up around the dairy industry. I've grown up around, you know, the animal agricultural industry. And a lot of my family members are farmers. So I'm somewhat of a black sheep amongst all of them. And I don't dislike that. I like that I've been able to think for myself and to make my own decisions about things. And we all have that ability. We all have that ability to make choices. But growing up around those environments, growing up on a farm myself for a spell, I've been able to sort of cultivate and foster my own attitudes towards things. And oftentimes when I'm near one of the biggest towns I'm near, you know, I obviously don't want to dox myself here, I'll often see cattle transportation trucks, and they're pretty packed together, man, and they whiz past and they smell of waste, and you can just tell, even when the truck is moving, but when they're parked, especially at the red lights or whatever, you can tell that those animals are just, they're not happy, man. They're being forced into those trucks against their will. And I don't understand how people can look at that and think that's acceptable. Even transporting horses around, it's not ideal, you know. You know, they get scared, they get skittish. Anybody that's spent any time around horses will tell you how they don't like being moved in the back of carts. And it makes you wonder, you know, it makes you think about our relationship with animals. And I think a lot of people probably have this sort of like false belief in that, oh, I treat my pets well. You know, my dogs love me, my cats love me. You know, I treat them with the utmost respect. I treat them as part of the family. And a lot of people have that attitude. And then they'll hit a kangaroo while they're driving to the next town overnight or something like that. Very common over here. Or they'll hit a deer and they won't think anything of it. And I know people that have actively gone out of their way. And, you know, especially when I was like younger, you know, in high school still, or just coming out of high school, where people would tell me about them actively swerving into like kangaroos or deers or birds, even, not to, you know, protect themselves, because you shouldn't brake when you go to hit something like that, but because they want to hit them. And that's pretty common. That is a pretty common attitude down here. It's this disrespect towards life itself. And I've never understood that. And I've always thought it was incredibly arrogant and incredibly harsh. And I don't know anyone with any sort of reasonable amount of empathy or connection to their surrounding world would actually have any connection to that, you know? Like, why would you give somebody a pass for doing that? Like, if you've got a car full of your kids and your family members and stuff, and your choice is to try and swerve to get out of the way and potentially cause an accident, or to just keep on going and hit that poor animal, obviously in that situation, the best thing to do is to hit the animal. That's one thing. That's one thing entirely. But if you're driving your vehicle and you're going out of your way to hit animals, to hit birds, to hit kangaroos, deer, foxes, I think that says a lot about you as a person and your disrespect towards life itself. And I don't know. I don't think we should be like cultivating that here in Australia. You know what I mean? I don't think that's a good idea. And I think as Aussies, typically I sort of associate Australia with having this sort of compassion. You know, we're surrounded by ocean. We know surfers, you know, and surfers, in my experience, have always had this sort of connection to the surrounding world. And I like that about surfers. I like that because they spend so much time in the water, they learn to respect Mother Nature. And people that don't spend a lot of time out in nature, people that don't have that sort of experience out in the natural world, they don't have that connection to the natural world. People that don't spend time outside, people that you know, don't stray too far from the urban centers, from the cities, I can understand why they don't really care about the natural world, because they've never really properly experienced it. But I hope that going forwards, people do take more time out of their lives to go down into the country, into rural Victoria, for example, and experience life a little differently. You know, if you're going to go up to the coast, go have a surf, go have a swim. Appreciate, you know, that beautiful aspect of Australia while we've got it to appreciate, you know, because one day it may be taken away from us. And I think in general, it doesn't matter where you're from, but we should always have this appreciation and this respect for the surrounding world, for Mother Nature itself. So I just wanted to share those thoughts today. Let me know what you guys think. You know, are you guys surfers? Do you spend much time out in the great outdoors? If you're Aussie, let me know in the comments below. I love it when I get to talk with other Aussies here on YouTube. And until the next video, my name is Aussie Marcel, and I'll catch you guys around.